Hey there, IMG. What can you say about Anne Rice? She's best known for writing The Vampire Chronicles, which center around a vampire Lestat. However, that's not the only character she ever wrote about, nor are vampires the only subject her books are about, as she also wrote a few that revolve around witches, and apparently loves her work so much she doesn't allow anyone to write fanfiction about them. Which, I suppose, ruins the fun for most people, but given how characters, hers or anybody's, are often treated in fanfiction, I don't blame her. At some point in the late 90s, however, she became a reborn Christian, and as such she decided not to write about the supernatural anymore and decided to write about Jesus instead. How's that any different from what she's done before? I haven't read any Anne Rice novels myself, and from what I saw in their movie adaptations, I'm a little reluctant to do so anytime soon. But then, earlier this year, she released today's book, The Wolf Gift. I suppose, what with most of today's media putting vampires and werewolf together, Anne Rice being famous for writing about vampires, why shouldn't she write about werewolves? Now let's take a look at the book itself. Okay, I don't know if this was done deliberately, but if so, what was the point? To make the book look older than it really is? They say don't judge a book by its cover, but what about the actual pages? Then again, I found another copy at the stores, and sometime later, and there was nothing wrong with it. So I guess it's just my bad luck. What does this say? The making of a werewolf, reimagined and reinvented as only Anne Rice could create it. I'm not so sure. I mean, the title is Wolf Gift, not Wolf Curse. Now, anyone who knows a thing or two about werewolves knows that before the Wolfman, being a werewolf wasn't necessarily a curse. So to me, the title implies it's not a reimagining so much as a throwback to the old legends. But enough about the cover. Let's see what the inside looks like. By the way, count with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? I know there are always pages you have to skip before you get to the actual story, but usually that's 2, 3, never more than 4. But 7? Another reason for tree huggers to, well, hug trees. Say what you will to the force that governs the universe.
But I've never seen anything to make me believe there's one all-powerful force controlling everything.
Perhaps we'll call it into being, and it will yet love us as we love it. Why this didn't ring an alarm bell in my head, I'll never know. Reuben was a tall man, well over 6 feet, with brown curly hair and deep-set blue eyes. Easiest way to introduce the main character. The fact was, he knew absolutely nothing about death. So does everyone else. What's your point? He was walking up a steep hill with an exotic and elegant older woman named Marchant Nidek. Okay. "I'm so glad the paper sent you, of all people," she said. "You're passionate, and I like that very much." Okay. For one moment he thought, yes, I'm passionate, and I want this house. But then he thought of his mother and of Celeste, his petite, brown-eyed girlfriend. For a moment I thought, maybe I should just stop drawing conclusions prematurely. He struggled not to blush. He felt some immediate connection with her he couldn't explain. "Oh, you gotta be kidding me." "Dear boy," she said, "when you write a novel someday about this house, you'll remember me in some way in it. You think you might do that?" He drew close to her. "I'll describe your beautiful smoky grey eyes and your soft golden hair. I'll
I'll describe your long graceful neck and how your hands make me think of birds when you gesture.
Ladies and gentlemen, our hero cheats on his girlfriend with a woman who's old enough to be his own mother. I guess this is what they mean when they call someone a motherfucker. He thought of her voice and her eyes and he loved her. He figured Celeste would understand. Celeste, after all, had been unfaithful to him with her old boyfriend twice. Oh, is that how you justify your own actions? I mean, if cheating on your significant other is wrong for somebody else, it should be wrong for you too! A loud crash, glass breaking, he woke up. Finally, some action! A sudden torrent of sounds exploded in the shadowy hallway. It had to be the deep, roaring growls of a fierce dog. With a savage snarl, the animal grabbed Reuben by his head, the teeth sinking into the side of his face. A man, attacked by a dog he doesn't recognize, is bitten by it, then the dog in question dies. And this reminds me of something. What was it again? Oh right, every single werewolf story ever told!
Dad, do you believe evil is a palpable force? Do you think there is such a thing as evil apart from what men do?
Ah, the ancient discussion. Which is also in every single werewolf story ever told. What was that about reimagining the werewolf again? 'Cause it isn't. And neither, as I thought, is it a throwback to the old legends.
Mistakes. Everything is simply a matter of mistakes.
No one else said a word.
I mean, look at Genesis, son,
said Phil.
The story of Adam and Eve. It's a mistake. They made a mistake.
He's right. The writers of Genesis made a mistake, or two, dozen, when they wrote that book. Oh, wait, that's not what he meant, is it? He meant Adam and Eve made a mistake. Which is something I don't quite get. Why do people keep insisting Adam and Eve made a mistake? I mean, they ate of a tree that they were forbidden to eat from, but if it was forbidden, why did it exist in the first place? So does it not make more sense to say that God himself made a mistake? If you think it's misplaced of me to address this, that's only because I feel bringing up Genesis is misplaced here. Oh well, as long as it's just a one time. And that was the end of it for Marchant. If there was a great blossoming on the other side, if her soul had expanded in the light of an infinite and embracing love, well, how are we to know it until we go there too? If he wants Marchant to still live in an afterlife of sorts, I understand. But an infinite and embracing love? Where does that come from? He tried for a moment to imagine God, a God as immense as the universe. Oh, of course. Almost forgot who wrote this. I believe that spirit is fully realized in a form of personality. I believe that the supremely personal is the universal Christ. Are you gonna go on like that? Was that a form of prayer? Was that a striving towards the spiritual? Was that spiritual in itself? Now it's starting to... She confessed that she did not believe in God. She wished she could believe in a personal God, a loving God who understood this, but she didn't. If I have to hear this one more time... The vastness of the universe brought him closer to faith in a God. Enough! We know you're a Christian, but you have to remind us in every single chapter? Are you perhaps compensating for all the years you weren't a Christian by mentioning your God every chance you got, no matter how misplaced? Before anyone's gonna twist all the words I just said, this is written by a Christian as well. Imagine if she wrote it the way Rice wrote her book. Hogwarts School of Holiness and the Divine. Headmaster Albus Dumbledore. Order of Christ. First Class. Grand Priest. Chief Angel. International Confederate of Holy Men. Voldemort, about 20 years ago, made a deal with the devil. and started looking for followers and found them too, hoping they could gain the power that they feel Jesus should give them. You may belong in Gryffindor, where dwell the true followers of Christ. You might belong in Hufflepuff, where they are sheep to the shepherd. Or yet in wise old Ravenclaw, if you have an open mind. Or perhaps in Slytherin, those cunning folk would follow the Antichrist to achieve their end. I rest my case. Every particle of his body was defined in these waves, the skin covering his face, his head, his hands, the muscles of his arms and legs. Ah, he's changing. Alleyway. He stopped. He heard the sound. A woman screaming. A woman terrified. A woman who had become her scream in fear of her life. Really? You're making a superhero out of a werewolf? The only times that ever happened was for comedy, out of necessity, or just by accident. Here, it's neither one, as it's explicitly mentioned that werewolves can't harm innocents. That's right, they can't harm innocents. Not won't harm, which would imply they have some choice in the matter, they just can't. The werewolf stories came about to explain unsolved serial killings. To suppose that the werewolves could only harm bad people not only raises a few moral questions, but also completely destroys what the werewolf stands for. Now some of you would think this is an original idea. Perhaps, but just because it's original doesn't mean it's not completely idiotic. I mean, while you're at it, why not do this? Last night he'd seen hairs dropping off him as they would off a shedding dog. They weren't there now. There was something there, tiny tendrils, almost too thin to see, that seemed to disintegrate when he tried to catch them up within his fingers. So it dries up, it dissolves, it flies away. All the evidence is inside me or gone, burned up. Well, isn't that convenient? That the only reason people aren't aware of the existence of werewolves is because all the evidence just evaporates. Actually, now that we've made it this far, I want to point out something. Anne Rice herself has said that the only way she feels she could be a Christian is by not being anti-gay, anti-feminist, anti-secular humanism, and anti-science. And you're not being anti-science by using an excuse so you don't have to explain how lycanthropy works? And again, this is coming from a woman who said, "In the name of Christ, I quit Christianity and being Christian, amen." Consistency is an alien word to you, isn't it? In several movies, the power to become a werewolf was referred to as a gift. Oh, really?
Your suffering is over, Bale, my son. Now you will find peace.
I'm condemned to wander about the world.
Well, thank you for taking my total fucking nightmare so seriously.
If you're going to reference existing movies, be sure you've actually watched them first. You know, she said, in the story of the prince and the frog, there's always a frog. This story, it has no frog. What was it that Dexter Morgan said about humans? That they have a knack for stating the blatantly obvious?
Oh, it's a different story, Laura, he responded. It's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde.
Don't you dare insult that story, she said reprovingly.
I don't think it's that story at all. It's not even Beauty and the Beast either.
Quite right. It's dumb and even dumber.
Maybe it's a new story.
No, it's actually an autobiography written by a woman who's getting closer to death. Please don't pretend it's more than that. The Making of a Werewolf, reimagined and reinvented as only Anne Rice could. Or more accurately, as only Anne Rice would. In short, this book is utter lunacy, a complete nightmare and not in a good way, and a big, big insult on the genre. But hey, What do you expect? It's written by a woman who belongs to a church that basically worships a divine psychopath. Seriously, I haven't been this disappointed in a book since... Yes, that one! You know, before I was a little reluctant to read anything else that Anne Rice wrote. But now, if this book is supposed to be better than anything she ever wrote, then I don't even want to read her other books! This was D. I'm signing off.